Okay, Nathan, what are you going to say?
We right-click on the line. Oh, you already have it up. Under first row, you change it to navigable.
Yeah, it's navigable, but good. Okay. Yeah, that allows you to have the flow going both ways. Otherwise, we're saying the data flows or you can connect only one way. So I'm going to do what Megan suggested to both the associations. If it goes only one way, like navigability from college conference or into college conference in this case is true. But the other way is false. If I change that, then it flows both ways. Now, yes.
What would be an example of when you would only have it flow one way?
Usually, you wouldn't, because if you're, for example, if you're doing a search using college, you're specifying the college name, you want to be able to flow from, so to get to the conference that the college is in, you have to flow through this.
Right.
So it's almost usually whenever I'm designing systems, I never keep it one way. I've never found it efficient, though there are times, and you'll see some of it. So if a college is in multiple conferences, in the database world, we cannot just say so when we put conference name here, is it possible in a database world to have multiple conferences? So for example, WVU is currently in the Big 12, was in the Big East 5 years ago. So could I have two conference names in one instance of college? We can. So yeah, if we did this, we couldn't accommodate it, right? So which means that in the relational world you cannot do it, but in the object-oriented world there is a way of doing. We can create a list, and sometimes in the object-oriented world, it becomes the connections are made on the database side, so you need to provide it also on the object-oriented side, and then it becomes like it's a redundancy. So we'll discuss some of it, but typically we want it to flow both ways. Okay, so now let's look at what this means. Each college is associated with multiple conferences, or like a school or college like Notre Dame may not be associated with any conference. So I removed this. Obviously, it's no longer here, and it's going. And the other thing was I wanted to know, do we need this direct association as well? But to represent this, so each college is now associated with multiple conferences, but the fact that what made us think of bringing in this new association, we could have just gone with this, but what was the factor that said, okay, let's create this new class? Here, Liv?
The combination of each college and a conference has attributes.
Okay, it has attributes. The association has attributes. So we don't have an association class or an associated entity. So because of that, we need to bring in. So there are two attributes, at least one, but probably two. What are the attributes here? Yeah.
I did mine year begin and year end.
Okay, good. Why did you have that?
Because you can't do it would be weird to put like how long they've been in it, because they could leave it at any time.
Yeah, you could either put year begin or like if they switch sometime, like the basketball schedule doesn't follow a calendar year. They start sometime in October or November, go up to March. So rather than saying a particular year, you might just say a date when they switched conferences. So you had what were the two you had?
I had year beginning and year end.
Okay, so I'd say instead of year, I'd say date begin and date end. So this tells you, if you had to interpret it, actually what would it tell you? This exactly. And how do you know which is their current conference? How do you know, for example, that WVU is in the Big 12 conference currently? Only if you know how you can figure that out. Okay, Ashley, how do you figure that out? Yeah, well, just conceptually, what tells you?
Going on the database, I guess, just making an ID with the college conference database.
Well, but it will connect to. It would have a connection to both Big East as well as the Big 12. So what tells you that WVU is currently in the Big 12? Yeah.
It wouldn't have been close.
Okay, good. Yeah. So if you think through it logically, there's no end date. So basically, there's no value for this, and if there's no value, it tells you that that's where you're currently associated. Okay. So we have this. One of the things, if you're just going with a pure database design, you wouldn't need this, but in the MVC, every class that you create in MVC, you create an identifier. So this is something that you do in MVC. This is not required in database, in a database model. Okay, so what we are saying here is, well, each college associates with one instance of whatever the connecting link is between college and conference, and then each instance here connects back to one college. Now, so once you have this has no value. This is totally redundant because you're providing two links between these two classes. So we cannot justify having. It's very, very. When we talk about so what is one of the things that we try to avoid in any. Well, with databases, any system, what do we try to not have? Redundancy. Okay, so redundancies can come about not only with having attributes, but also with, this is an association. And whenever you have multiple associations between the same two classes or entities, what happens? So you're basically saying, there is a relationship or connection. So for WVU, they're associated with Big East, with Big 12. Now, it goes through this, and if you add a second link as well, so you'll have to maintain it, and yeah.
Well, when you're creating it in like actual code, you're gonna have problems because the the college ID and conference ID are both going to be in college conference, but then you're also going to have it in each other's tables, and you shouldn't have that.
Yeah, well, this because it's many to many, you'll have to create an entire new table as well. So there'll be there's going to be two entirely different tables in which you have to maintain the same data. And so redundancy takes up space, but what is the real problem of redundancy? Yeah.
Doesn't it take longer to get your results or whatever the
Well, it could because there's more data, but systems have become so fast now, it probably wouldn't be in much more, like it'll be a millisecond or a microsecond.
If you change anything, you're going to have to make sure that in every place that it appears, otherwise your data is going to be wrong.
Yeah, exactly. What Krista pointed out is the bigger issue, which is when you have data that is inconsistent, so now which is the correct information? So that's really the issue. I know that I think Dr. Peace talks about redundancy a lot, but hopefully you also understand that that's just the symptom of the problem. The problem is really inconsistent data. Okay, so given that we don't need it, I'll not take it out until we complete setting this up, because this, so the instinct, and I saw that most of you tended to do this, you went to make it many to many. So like something like this, and you had your minimum multiplicity difference, but I think all except Eric went with, well, either many to many on both sides or many to many at least on one side. But let's try to think through the logic. What does this represent, this new class? Okay, Megan? Okay, they entered, exited, but even more fundamentally, what's it doing? It's allowing you to. So if we were to remove, see, we said this is now representing the connection between these two, right? So each instance here represents a connection between one college and one conference. So it's that link. So this is the college conference link. So each college, so given a particular college conference link, looking at it from, so make yourself, think of yourself as being a college conference object, okay? So if you are a college conference object, how many college instances will you connect to or associate with? So if you existed here, so give me an example of one instance here. What will it contain? Yeah. So if you were having think of if you are a row in a database. Okay. It will contain the two dates. It has an ID, which is an identifier. In the database, what else will you see? The college and the conference ID to make the connection, right? So each row contains the primary key, which identifies, which is a made-up key, but also we are going to get the IDs of the connecting, whatever the ID for the Big 12 is, and an ID for WVU. So it's connecting those two. And so from here, so that's what makes up this college conference object. Now from here, from college conference, if you go to college, how many instances can this one object associate with? Can it associate with WVU and Virginia Tech or Duke? Yes, no? It cannot associate with more than one, right? If it is connecting WVU with Big East, this ID is only going to reference WVU over here. It's not going to reference any other college. So what's the multiplicity on this side? Each instance here can associate with what? Ashley? Okay, with one college. So if we go to the college side, it's going to associate with a maximum of one college. What's the minimum? Why do you say minimum 1? Can it be without being associated with any college? So if you had an instance here, this is, I can see why you might think that, because, well, but what we said was that each conference has to associate with at least one college. So what would be the reasoning to say it's minimum 0? Yeah, you can. The college might not have a conference, but here we are not looking at it from the, are we looking at it from the college's perspective?
Well, if they don't have a conference, they don't say they enter the conference.
Yeah, they wouldn't have it, but how would you represent that? But remember, we are not asking the question from the college's perspective, we are asking it from the connecting links perspective. So when we're going from here to here, the maximum is one college, but can you have a connecting link without it being associated with any college? If there's an instance here, it has to associate with at least one college instance, right? So which means the minimum is 1 and the maximum is 1. Yeah.
How does the application determine what the first role is and what the second role is?
What the first role, you mean how did it put it in here?
Right, how do you know which one to change without doing it and see what affected?
Well, it's because you can see the first role name, and since we are putting it next to it, so that's what tells you. But what makes it the first role depends on where you are putting this add-on. So if you start here, it will make this the first role, and what is it? Okay, so let's see. So let's reason through the other side, coming from college, going to the college conference. So if you are a college instance of college, how many instances do you associate with in this college conference? Somebody other than Kosh, can you tell me if you are a college instance, think yourself as being WVU, how many instances would you associate here?
I can have one.
Okay.
So it definitely is one.
Well, don't say one to many, because one to many, it has multiple meanings. It can either indicate one to many this side, but what we really mean is what's the minimum, what's the maximum. So first, so what's the question that we have to ask for the maximum multiplicity?
That can there be more than 2 million dates and 2 million dates?
No, again, part of why I keep asking you to ask the question. So you tell me, why do I keep asking you for a question rather than an answer?
So that we understand it better.
When you are on a client project with Deloitte, what are you going to be doing?
Asking questions.
Exactly. So that's why you need to do this, right? So what is the question you'll ask? So let's say they told you that there are these college and conference instances. Okay, I'll go with live. I keep thinking of, as I said, my Russian friend. Okay.
How many can it have? I forget which ones we're talking about.
Well, we are now, so you make yourself into this college object, so you, whatever the representation is, so you anthropomorphize the college. So you are now a college and think of yourself as WVU. So given that you are a college, what is the question you're asking to regarding the association with
How many college ID or college conference, all of those can I have?
can I associate? So how many conferences can you be associated with? Okay. So, and what's the answer to that? Okay. So that's the maximum multiplicity. Now, what's the question for the minimum multiplicity? Okay, Eric?
How many college conferences do I have to be associated with?
Okay, or even more, if you want to make it even more concise and precise, do you have to be associated with a conference? What's the answer to that? No, so which means it makes it optional. So the minimum is 0, maximum is many. Okay, so the same reasoning this side. Yeah.
Okay, in 351 is it 0 comma many? Is
Okay.
that not the syntax here?
Over here, well, if it is, you can see the options here. So if you have many in the multiplicity, the minimum becomes. So in a way, I prefer this. It's in the sense that you don't add extra stuff. So yeah, but so it depends on the tool. Okay. So coming back here, what's the so now can you set it up here? What's it going to be? The same logic, right? Each conference associates with multiple colleges, so it's going to be from each conference to the college conference. It's going to be many. What's the minimum? Logan, what's the minimum going from a conference object? So if you think of yourself being Big 12, it's going to associate with multiple colleges. What's the minimum each conference associates with?
1 in order to be a conference you have to have.
Okay, we said that we cannot have a conference without a college, so we'll select that. What about the other way from college conference to conference? Sally, what's the... Okay, so each of these instances has to associate with at least one conference. So, because this is the connecting link. Okay, so once you have this, we can get rid of this association. Okay, so we have a model here. Yeah.
What is the zero semantic for the college conference relationship? Because, like, in the case of the Big East, you wouldn't have any colleges in the conference, and it'd still be in the database.
Okay, so actually that's a very valid point what Chris brings up, though the Big East still exists, so, but what if a conference disappears, in the sense there are no more, and there used to be, I don't know if it's still there, Conference USA, I think. Okay, so, well, but that is a possibility that a conference no longer has any schools. So that's a possibility. So even though at the point of forming the conference, that it has to have at least one college, but that's interesting though. Do we now say so what Chris is saying is maybe after 10 years the conference no longer has any colleges associated, with it. So would that make it 0 at that point? Yes?
Well, for our database, we still have the college in it but it'll still have an end date. So it would still have something in it, right?
Yeah, the issue is it is still there because if we are saying even though there are no colleges currently in that conference,
You never take it out.
yeah, it used to be there. If you remove the conference, then I know that 20 years ago WVU was in a conference that I think no longer exists. I forget the name of the conference. Somebody here must be a much bigger fan than I'm a very peripheral fan, if at all. But the issue is you need to. So the crucial part is, and this is many times we think of things in this slice of time as of the current moment, but our systems really span history, a span of time both in the past and going into the future. So you have to visualize it as what happens past, present, and future. Okay, so let's try to now translate this into the database. How many of you have this created here? Okay.
I didn't know what.
You didn't know what to put in. What do you mean, sir? Okay, so let's try to put in some attributes here. Conference ID. Yeah, Liv, you had a...
Oh, I was finished.
Okay. These two, I'll just put this down in your car so that we have it if somebody wants to see it in China or Japan, I guess, or Chinese, actually, translated. I guess now there are so many auto-translators that you could potentially get the language equivalent. But anyways, constraint PK conference primary key conference ID. Okay, so we have so anytime I add in, I want to be able to drop it. Into conference. Just put in well. By the way, if we could have just had something very simple, and if all this complexity is because it lives, you wanted the complex version of it. So, but anyways, no, actually, I'm glad that you wanted it because it makes it much more interesting and brings in some aspects that we need to understand that. So anyways, so if you at this point just executed it, it should, I always usually have these select statements so that I can see whether okay, there's already an object named conference in the database. What did I do incorrectly here? Why is it generating this? of the things I want you to learn to do is I understand where errors are occurring, so that you are able to fix them. When my daughter was young, I used to watch Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. But obviously, I'm now in Pittsburgh. So, but one of the things, well, so at one point he mentioned was if was talking about a house painter, and he said if whoever was interviewing him asked the question, "Have you ever made a mistake?" And the painter said, "No, I've never made it." And whoever was interviewing him said, "I cannot hire you for the job." Why do you think he said that?
Because he's lying.
Well, that could well be the case. But well, what's another reason for it? Yeah.
So how to fix it, you can fix it.
Exactly. We are going to make mistakes. Obviously I made a mistake after so many years of working with databases. So part of it is knowing whether you can fix it when you make a mistake. So what's the mistake here? How many of you can? It's saying there's an object named conference already in the database. So where would you look if you had this mistake show up? Okay, Logan first, and then I'll come to Eric.
You didn't change the drop table to the conference.
Yeah, I just copied and pasted, and I just made the change to this check, and I didn't drop it. So try to read these errors and become somewhat conversant with it. So if it does occur, you know how to fix it. And finally, the connecting link between these two. Okay. One of the things I do when I do some development is, well, we can just go with this for now because the data set is small. But sometimes I'll give a different starting value for conference so that I know that, so instead of starting from 1, I might start from 10. And if I do that, it helps distinguish between what a college ID is and what a conference ID is. Actually, I might go up to 100 because I have up to 10 with the college. Do you see what this does if I change this starting value? Yeah. What's that?
You explained this part last class, but you just explain it once again, the ink part. Thing we do on the job.
Well, this just destroys the existing table. It drops it, and so that it can recreate it. So these are the create table statements. So you have two options whenever you are doing development. Either you can basically wipe out whatever exists and create it new, or alter it. So you can have an alter table statement here, but altering, sometimes it retains some of the previous whatever material, including incorrect stuff, and if you want to clean it up fully, it's better to drop and create. This is only during the development process. If you released it and it's in production, then you can't do this because you have customer data and so on.
You have your if kind of the top.
Yeah.
I did mine, like every time I was about to create a new table, did that change it or was that still okay?
It could, I guess it should be fine. So you're basically deleting, creating, deleting, create. It should, I think, be fine. The reason I keep it here is it gives me a sense of what are all the tables I have in my system. Okay, the last one is the, another 10 minutes. So, okay, college conference. Okay, then how many of you figured out how to create college conference? Okay, so you have, okay. Most of you did. Which one?
The college conference ID.
If you are taking a pure database approach, we don't. And why would we not? Krista, could you tell us?
Because it doesn't, it's expensive. It doesn't really have its own primary key. It takes the primary key from the killer database.
Okay, so what Krista said you could do if you're taking a pure database approach, like if you are doing what you're doing in 353 with what's called a three-layered architecture, then the reason we are doing this is mainly for MVC. There are some companies that their approach is they have an ID for every table, but there are others, I would say most companies which do development, which if they are following MVC, they wouldn't have this. In which case, as Krista pointed out, you would have the connecting link, so it will be college ID. And then whatever, so these two would make up our, and one of the things you might want to add in, if you make something a primary key, it automatically becomes, these are not nullable. The other, so if you want to make college name also not to have a null value, you have to explicitly state that it should be not null. So if there is any other attribute that, well, here it's optional whether you make it not null or not, because by it being designated a primary key, the database won't allow you to have null values.
Identity won't have no value anyway.
Yeah, exactly. That's why this is not necessary. Okay. So if we come down here and you're connecting these two, these are the two. So we'll go with what Krista has done, and then we'll come back to this. So if I set up a constraint, the primary key for this will be, how many of you can tell me the primary key if I don't have a made-up primary key? Okay, I'll begin. What? Yeah, these two as the composite primary key. So I would have college ID, conference ID as my composite, and I have to use the keyword primary key. Okay. Now there is another piece that you have to bring in as well, but before I do that, let me bring in the two attributes that Liv had mentioned. What are the two attributes for this table? What are the two attributes you mentioned? Yeah, date begin, date end. So we'll add those in. What was the data type you used for this? Okay. There is a data type, date begin, date end. Okay. Now what seemed like you just take the primary keys from the two connecting tables, make it a composite primary key, may no longer work. Can somebody tell me why this may no longer work? Okay, let's.
You have to references, so you would do college ID in conference keys.
Okay, so well, you're saying set up the foreign keys.
Oh,
That even, okay, we can do that, but even otherwise, this primary key may no longer hold. Okay.
conference ID would be repeated, so it wouldn't be unique.
Why would it be repeated? Where would it get repeated? Like, for example, WVU is in both Big 12 and was in the Big East. So, would that, when you say repeated, yeah.
I think it's weird, like, West Virginia University is in conference ID 1, but so is Texas,
Yeah.
so it would be unique.
But what makes up the primary key? Both of them put together. So as long as the combination is unique, it is good. Yeah.
Wouldn't you have to have date begin and date end?
Why would you need to have date begin and date end?
That way, it's like, so that it's already in conference ID.
When you say links, that as far as the primary key is concerned, that's not going to be an issue. You have to give me some logic behind when this primary key might not work. Yeah, Hallie?
If a college leaves a conference and comes back into it, then it would be not going to use it for college conference ID.
Okay, Hallie, what she just said, if a college leaves the conference and then comes back, and some team, like some college in Texas, I think did that. But so if you leave and come back, what happens? Well, but if we just change the date begin, so let's say, for some, I forget which Texas team it was. Let's just say Texas A&M was with Big 12, then they went to the ACC, and then came back to the Big 12, let's say. I'll take some team that's here, Texas. Okay, so one was associated with I'll just use what I already have, 101 from let's say 1/1/1990 to 5/1/1995, and then one was, well, okay, I guess I'm going with WVU here, so that's associated with from 5/2/1995 to let's say to 1/1/12/31/2010, and let's say they come back to this conference 101 from 1/1/2011 to present. It's because of, so if I do this, if I had this, and if just these two made up my primary key, what would happen to WVU's record if I just had these two? And so what would be my begin date as far as which conferences the Big East is concerned? Krista?
It wouldn't let you add a new one, so it would stay with 1990.
It would, or if I said, if I overwrote it, I could only have one instance of it, right? So which meant that it won't allow me to introduce a second instance of 1 and 101. So it would force me to change the date from 1/1/1990 to 1/1/2011. And if I also set some other constraint, which is like a integrity constraint, you don't want a starting date that is later than the ending date, right? So if I change this alone to this, what would be my ending date? Could be this one. So these are some concerns, obviously, but so what would I have to do? And go back to Hallie, since she mentioned this. This is the logical reason. So how do I solve or address it? Just starting with the primary key. Oh, you mean just bring this in? I could do that, but if I didn't do that, what would I have to do? Okay, let's see, Eric.
You add your begin or date begin or whatever to primary key.
Yeah, I will add date begin, and that's the reason for doing it. And well, Ashley suggested it. I want you to know why you want to add it, and you need to add both date begin and date end. No, it's not necessary. So you can just go with the combination of these three should uniquely determine each row. So that's one thing that you can do. But once you start having a primary key that starts to become very large, that's also an indicator that you probably should create this made-up key. So whenever there are time-based aspects to applications, which is why you have to thank Liv for doing it, not Les. But so anyways, the issue is, so think about it with time. So complete this. The next class, what I would like for you to do before you come to class is to start thinking of writing these. So complete this and explore two other ideas. One is the connecting link. So you need to connect to the college and conference tables. So what do you do to do that? Connect to college and conference. And the other is you need to ensure that start date or date begin is earlier than date end. So these two you'll have to figure out. And finally, there are some questions. So I want you to write some queries. Which colleges are in the Big 12, as well as something like which is the current conference for each college, and maybe the last question, when was WVU in the Big East Conference? Okay, so work through these things on the SQL part, and as far as your project, rework the user stories, bring it to class so we can put it onto Visual Studio Team Services. Yes.
Sorry. How was the date written? Like the date that is like when we enter data and stuff?
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's just you can the easiest is it's month, day, year, and so the US format would be what's the date today? 23. If single quotes, 17. So insert into whatever. College conference. And whatever the date is, so you would just put this in. So you can take it in month, day, year, or you can put it in year, month, day.
Okay. Do you want this to be accurate, like information, like should be with it, and maybe make updates?
You can make updates.
Okay. I have another question.
Okay. I'll see you next Tuesday then.